What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto rejects his own friends? If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. Okay, so this may be a bit of an old and well-used plot device, but I went with it anyways. Why? Because that's what I wanted to write. Anyway, this story is almost completely written, and as it's the first time actually posting, we'll see how well I can figure out how the whole posting issue goes. I say that because I'm definitely not the most technically capable individual roaming the planet. Just as a disclaimer, I don't own Naruto, nor any other kick-ass ninjas. Nor do I make any money off of this. However, I can think of a few times in my life where a pocket full of kick-ass ninjas would have come in pretty handy. Thanks so much for reading, and I hope you enjoy. Oi, Ba-chan, what's going on? Is it a mission? Naruto could barely conceal his excitement at the prospect of being sent out on another mission. Hopefully a B class or higher. Kami knew he could use the money as well as the distraction. But as his eager blue eyes continued staring down at the busty blonde in front of him, Naruto's excitement began fading, because the look on Tsunade's face wasn't anything he'd seen before. Normally, by now, the Hokage would be yelling at him to sit down and shut the hell up. At the very least, she'd have scolded him for calling her Ba-chan. Scrunching up his face, Naruto shifted on his feet. Ba-chan? Naruto, would you like to sit down? Damn, now he knew something was wrong. The old hag was never this nice. Giving his biggest grin, Naruto squashed the unease settling into his gut. Oh, come on. It can't be that bad. And, he truly believed that. After all, the Akatsuki were all but destroyed, the village was safe, and the Teme was back where he belonged. As long as those three things were still correct, whatever Tsunade had to say really couldn't be that dire. So, you don't want to sit? Naruto huffed. No, I've always done better on my feet. Tsunade shrugged, still staring down at the official request form in her hands, although, she supposed calling it a request was being kind. Really, it was nothing short of an order. She'd been staring at it all night, but not even the tick of the clock changed what it said. Nor did it change the unmistakable handwriting inked on the page. Sighing, Tsunade wondered if she'd still have an office left 10 minutes from now. Naruto, I've had a request. Rubbing the end of his nose, Naruto questioned, a request? For what? Tsunade placed her chin in her hand. It's an official request made by a member of one of the Leaf Village's oldest and most treasured clans. By law, it is not something I can dismiss nor deny. And it is not something you can refuse. Naruto rubbed the back of his head, his blue eyes confused. He couldn't imagine what any of this could have to do with him. As far as he was concerned, he hadn't had any direct interaction with anyone that important in months. Well, excluding the Teme. I mean, he might be the last of the Uchihas, but that clan name was about as old and weighty as it got. But if Sasuke wanted something, he'd have asked, not sent an official request, thus bringing him back to his original state of confusion. So what does that have to do with me? Tsunade reached for her glass of sake, only to find it empty. Cursing under her breath, she lamented the fact that what she was about to say would need to be done without the benefit of liquid courage. Naruto, the request is one of marriage. Marriage? To who? Uchiha Sasuke. Sasuke? Who wants to marry that Teme? Tsunade couldn't stop the palm of her hand as it flew up, smacking against her forehead. Kami, Naruto really could be an idiot. Brat, it's not a request for Sasuke's hand in marriage, but yours. Huh? A low growl emanated from deep in Tsunade's chest. Moron, the request came from Sasuke, he's asking permission to marry you. Slowly, comprehension began dawning. First the color drained from Naruto's face, his jaw gaping open like a fish. But as the wheels of his rusty brain began turning, he came to the only conclusion his past experiences with the bastard could lead him to, and with this thought, color began returning to his cheeks at lightning speed. Soon, a violent red chakra was taking over the room. That bastard. Naruto. What the fuck kind of joke is this? His games have gone too far. Naruto, I think he's Esser. The growl coming from Naruto put Tsunade's earlier one to shame. He's not getting away with this. I'll make him pay for making fun of me. Tsunade stood from behind her desk. This was exactly what she'd been afraid would happen. Naruto was beyond listening to reason. She could tell him all she wanted that she didn't think this was a joke, far from it. Uchiha Sasuke had been completely serious last night when he'd officially filed his request. And, as she'd already stated, since the request came from one of their most valued clans, she could not refuse, nor deny it, and neither could the brat. Naruto, calm down. Like hell, where the fuck is he? What? Never mind, I'll find him. And with that, Naruto rushed from her office, leaving the doors hanging precariously from their twisted hinges. Uchiha Sasuke sat at his kitchen counter, calmly drinking a cup of tea while periodically glancing at a nearby clock. By all rights, he should be anything but calm, but getting anxious over his Dobi's impending visit was beyond pointless. He'd made his decision and that was that. Of course, he'd had a little help coming to said decision. Help in the way of too much unwanted attention thrown at his Dobi over the past few weeks. Of course, said blonde was completely oblivious to the looks and poorly disguised innuendos coming from both men and women. But Uchiha Sasuke was not so blind, and when a certain dark-haired, pale-skinned artist by the name of Sai maneuvered himself into, accidentally, grabbing Naruto's ass 2 days ago, well, Sasuke had gone from getting gently nudged to being pushed over the proverbial cliff. This was, after all, his blonde Dobi they were talking about. It was past time for Sasuke to stake his claim, which was exactly what he'd done last night. Sneaking yet another look at the clock, Sasuke figured Naruto should be busting through his door any minute. Tsunade had said she'd speak with the blonde first thing this morning and Sasuke had no illusions as to what Naruto's reaction would be, not that he could say he'd really blame him. A sudden wave of fierce chakra assaulted Sasuke's senses and it was moving fast. Sitting up straighter, he couldn't help but swallow the knot of saliva forcing its way down his suddenly dry throat. He'd known Naruto would be pissed, but this was beyond what he'd anticipated. There was no mistaking this chakra signature, and it was far from Naruto's normal warm blue hue. Shit, was all Sasuke had time to say before the front door of his home was thrown into the living room. Sasuke, you fucking bastard, where the hell are you? Sasuke didn't bother responding. The kitchen was right off the living room and by now, Naruto was already facing him, his blue eyes having long ago faded to bloody red. Narrowing his black eyes down to slits, Sasuke braced himself as a very feral-looking Naruto launched towards him, grabbing the Uchiha around the neck, lifting him off his chair and slamming him into the kitchen cabinets. Stifling a painful groan, Sasuke tried twisting enough to get one of the cabinet doorknobs out of the middle of his back. Staring into Naruto's slitted pupils, Sasuke could feel the Kyuubi's hot breath pushing across his face, its elongated fangs dripping saliva as its claws dug mercilessly into Sasuke's unprotected neck. He was staring his death in the face and knew he had to act quickly. "Dobi, are you really this weak?" Sasuke managed to whisper through his partially crushed trachea. Sasuke's sarcastic dig did exactly what he wanted. It made the still-functioning part of Naruto's brain stop and think. "What are you talking about?" Naruto growled. "Idiot, your Kyuubi's showing." The hushed response hit its target perfectly and Sasuke watched in mild fascination as the fangs retreated and Naruto's eyes eased back from red to magenta and finally the obscenely bright blue he loved so much. Blinking rapidly, Naruto stood back, releasing Sasuke's neck, letting the pale-skinned man place his feet firmly onto the ground. Looking down at his hands, Naruto dumbly stared at the traces of blood under his fingernails, finally glancing back up to see the claw marks on Sasuke's neck, along with their individual crimson trails slowly leaking ever downward. Despite their obvious presence, Sasuke refused to acknowledge the injury, not even allowing his hand to come up and inspect the damage. Gulping loudly, Naruto backed out of the kitchen and into the living room, only stopping when his foot hit the back of the couch. Sasuke, I mean. Naruto looked from Sasuke back to the sun shining through the open doorway, which was wrong because there should be a door there to block out the sun. But instead of hanging up where it should, the thing was laying on the floor, and that was just not right. Are you okay? Did I hurt you? Sasuke didn't like the worried look on Naruto's face, but he absolutely detested the guilt lacing it even more. "Dobi, as if you could ever hurt me." A flash of anger quickly replaced any feelings of regret. "Bastard, it's all your fault anyway." Sasuke crossed his arms over his chest, raising a single eyebrow as he tried to ignore the stinging pain in his back and neck. "Really? How so? Don't try and play smart with me. You know damn well what you did." Oh, I don't have to play at being smart, Naruto. That's your department. Naruto grabbed his hair, pulling the blonde strands in frustration. Gah, why do you have to be such an ass all the time? You know I can be smart. When? I am so going to kick your ass. As I said earlier, you couldn't hurt me if you tried. Balling his hands into small fists, Naruto was just about to jump across the counter and tackle his rival once again. But the continually leaking wounds on Sasuke's neck reminded him just how dangerous his anger could become, and despite how pissed he was with the Teme, he didn't really want to murder Sasuke. Trying to rein in his feelings, Naruto placed his hands on his hips, turning his back on endless black eyes as he stared around the Uchiha's depressing home. The large living room he was standing in should have seemed open and airy, but it only felt stale. With the heavy curtains tightly pulled across each and every window, the only natural air and sunlight entering the room was through the gaping hole left where the door should be. Continuing to distract himself, Naruto started walking towards the windows, a new mission forming in his head. It's no wonder you're so crabby all the time. You practically live in a cave. Reaching up, he roughly grabbed the closest set of curtains, pulling the dusty fabric back and throwing open the window. Naruto, Sasuke's voice low and threatening. What do you think you're doing? You need to lighten up, literally, he answered while heading to the next window. I happen to like the dark. Yeah? Well, I happen to like kicking your ass, but I don't get to do that nearly as often as I'd like. What the hell's that supposed to mean? Naruto rolled his eyes. It means we don't always get what we want. I'm here and I say this room needs aired out. Deal with it. Sasuke's irritation was rapidly being replaced by something else. As the warm rays of the sun filtered into his home, he stared at the back of his blonde friend's head. This was why he'd made the request. Why he wanted Naruto to be his and no one else's. Why he needed the idiot. Anyone else would have stopped what they were doing as soon as they heard the anger in Sasuke's voice. Anyone else would have been too scared to disobey him. But not Naruto. No, Naruto gave Sasuke what he needed, not what he wanted. With the final window open and glistening in the unrelenting sun, Naruto turned to his supposed friend. By now, he thought he had his anger under control enough to get to the point of this visit. Bastard, this time you've gone too far. Uncrossing his arms, Sasuke calmly walked around the counter, coming to stand in almost the very spot Naruto was gracing just a few minutes before. Exactly what have I gone too far with this time? Naruto felt the color rising to his cheeks and worked to squash the irritation. Are you really going to make me say it? Yes. Gritting his teeth, Naruto stared unbelievingly at the last Uchiha. Did you, or did you not, make a formal request to the old hag asking that we be allowed to marry? Naruto leaned back on his heels. He'd made it perfectly clear. There was no way the bastard could get out of giving a straight answer. But Sasuke had no intention of trying to deny anything and simply shrugged his shoulders as he answered a simple, yes. For the second time that morning, Naruto's jaw gapped. Why in the hell would you do something like that? Then, narrowing his eyes, he pointed an accusing finger at his friend. You think this is funny? Are you that desperate for a laugh? Or, are you still trying to get me killed? Because once those fangirls of yours get a whiff of this, I'm gonna constantly be running for my life. Sasuke knew Naruto would think he had some kind of ulterior motive behind this, but the last one took him by surprise. To answer your questions, no, I do not think this is funny, and no, I am not that desperate for a laugh. And, if I still wanted you dead, you wouldn't be standing in my living room right now. Sasuke stared into Naruto's skeptical blue orbs and finally asked, why do you think this is a joke? Naruto gave a quick, barking laugh. Why wouldn't it be? You've made it pretty clear what you think of me. Sasuke's eyebrows went up slightly, thinking this might be more entertaining than he'd originally thought. Really? Maybe you should enlighten me. Naruto stared, incredulous. But if the Teme wanted a list of reasons, he'd be happy to oblige. You think I'm an idiot? True. I'm obnoxious. Right again. I'm loud. 3 for 3. I irritate the hell out of you. Most assuredly. Naruto huffed. See Teme, those are hardly endearing traits. Sasuke shrugged. Depends on who you're trying to endear yourself. By now, Naruto had turned his body away from Sasuke, only shifting his eyes to stare into his bored face, trying in vain to find anything in his facial expression that would allow him to figure out what in the hell was going on. But as USAL, Sasuke wore a blank mask. Finally shaking his head, Naruto began walking towards the doorway. He wasn't about to apologize for the busted frame, and if Sasuke even thought about asking him to pay for it, then the bastard would have a permanent hole in his house. Whatever. I'm tired of trying to figure you out. Just tell Tsunade you're revoking your request and we'll forget it happened. No. Naruto stopped mid-stride. He'd almost made it to the open doorway. What? Why the hell not? Because, I don't want to. Teme, that's not a reason. Working hard to slow his stampeding heart, Sasuke began walking towards his blonde target, keeping his eyes locked with Naruto's as he spoke. Did you ever stop to think I was serious? Naruto looked genuinely confused. No, why would I? Because, moron, that's exactly what I am. Naruto furrowed his brow. But you can't be. Why? You know perfectly well Uchihas don't joke around. Not about something like this. But, I mean, I think we just established that you don't even like me. No, we didn't. You simply gave a true assessment of some of your more colorful attributes and assumed I didn't like them. I don't understand. That's obvious. By now, Sasuke was mere inches away from Naruto as he continued to hold his gaze even. All he wanted to do was reach out and run his hand down the blonde's scarred cheeks, but it was too soon. He'd never see the gesture as it was meant. Sasuke, maybe, for now, you shouldn't try and understand it. Huh? Sasuke sighed. He was going to have to approach this differently. Naruto, promise to go out on a date with me. What? You heard me. You want to know why I'm doing this? Well, there's no better way to find out than that. Give me a chance and I'll do everything I can to make you understand what this is about. Naruto placed his hands behind his head, leaning back on his heels as he continued to dubiously stare at the raven-haired man in front of him. I don't know. I'll pay. Immediately, Naruto's ears perked up. You'll buy me ramen? Sasuke's eyes narrowed. If that's what you really want. I'm sure they sell that junk food at Shugida's too. Shugida's? That's the fanciest place in Konoha. Why would you want to go there? Dobi, have you ever even been to Shugida's? Slowly, Naruto shook his head. As if I could afford something like that. Well, now you can see what it looks like inside and not have to worry about the bill. Looking off to his side, Naruto began wringing his hands. It was a nervous gesture, one he'd never admit doing. I don't know. I don't have anything suitable to wear. What are you now? A girl? Shut up, Teme. I'm not a girl, and in case you don't remember, you're the one acting like I am. What with this whole stupid marriage thing and all? It's legal for two men to marry in the leaf, Sasuke said matter-of-factly. Gah, stop saying things like that. Naruto was near to pulling his hair out again. I'll stop if you agree to have dinner with me tomorrow at Shugida's. Naruto stared at the floor, unsure what to say. On the one hand, when was he ever going to get an opportunity like this again? There was no way in hell he could ever afford to eat somewhere like Shugida's. And, he supposed he could put up with all this nonsense about marrying the Teme for a free meal there. On the other hand, there was the not-so-simple matter of who he was. Would they even let him? Who would have thought you'd be this scared? Sasuke interrupted Naruto's thoughts, his voice taunting. Instantly, Naruto's head shot up. Who said I was scared? It's fairly obvious. Naruto's eyes narrowed. Fine, I promise. Just tell me what time to be there. Inwardly, Sasuke beamed at his success. Outwardly, he only smirked. I'll come and get you tomorrow at 7. Fine bastard. Just don't be late. And, I'll have you know I plan on eating until I explode, so bring plenty of cash. Sasuke shoved his hands in his pockets, his smirk threatening to become a full-blown smile as Naruto walked out of his house, only to stop and curse on the front step. Forget something? With hands on hips, Naruto turned, his cheeks a fiery red. No, I just remembered I still don't have anything fancy enough to wear. I'll take care of it. What's that supposed to mean? It means, I'll take care of it. Teme, you'll see tomorrow. Now, get off my property. Sasuke watched Naruto turn back around, all the while spewing barely intelligible insults regarding ungrateful bastards and ice-cold assholes. Once his blonde head of hair could no longer be seen, Sasuke headed back into his house, giving his busted doorframe a cursory glance before making a mental note to contact someone to fix it, immediately. Sitting down on his couch, Sasuke left the windows and curtains open, enjoying the warm breeze and sunlight illuminating the space. Naruto was right, it was time to stop sitting in the dark and reach for the light, which was exactly what he was doing. Now, if only he could get his blonde Dobi to see it that way. Climbing the stairs to his bedroom, Sasuke grabbed his wallet. Heading for town, he had 3 missions. 1. Find someone to fix his house. 2. Shop for clothes for his dobi. And 3. Make reservations at Shugida's. It was going to be a full day. Oh, wow. I'm such a happy girl right now as I received several reviews. As with most of us, I write for my own sanity, therapy, but it is always nice to know others enjoy it as well. Anywho, since you were all so very nice, I decided to give you another chapter. Hopefully, I'll give you 1 or 2 more tomorrow as they're already written. I just have to upload them. A word of caution, I don't have a beta, so I'm sure there'll be mistakes. But hey, I'm not perfect, so don't expect my writing to be either. Hopefully the mistakes won't detract from the overall story. Another word of caution. This story will eventually contain citrus, but it won't be until the end. There will be some nice moments of implied tension, but not the actual deed, at least, not for a while. Disclaimer. As stated before, I do not own Naruto, nor do I make any money off of this fiction. And, although that generally makes me sad, I'm glad I don't own Mato Guy. Not that I don't enjoy his character, for all those Guy Sensei fans out there. I just don't think I'd want to own him. Now, on with the story. Naruto spent most of the following day training, pushing his body to the breaking point in an effort to try and get the last 24 hours out of his head. Last night, falling asleep was something he could only dream about, and the breaking of dawn found him already dressed and heading into the woods. By midday, he thought he'd finally tired himself enough to get in a small nap before tonight's outing. Walking back through the village, he missed the shot of pink hair floating towards him. Naruto. Hey, Naruto, wait up. Turning, Naruto found Sakura's aqua-colored eyes staring cautiously into his own. Placing his hands behind his head, he gave her his widest grin. Oi, Sakura-chan, how are you doing? Sakura placed hands on hips, giving her friend a contemplative once-over. Naruto, what have you been up to? I didn't think you were scheduled for any missions. I'm not. Then why do you look so run down? Placing her hands out in front of her, Sakura used her medical training to briefly assess Naruto's physical well-being. Damn it, Naruto. Your chakra's near to exhaustion. Then, narrowing her eyes, she accused, have you and Sasuke been fighting again? At the mention of the Tami's name, Naruto's face turned an unhealthy shade of red. No. I haven't seen the bastard all day. How come I don't believe you? Naruto practically huffed as he turned and began walking towards his apartment, not caring if Sakura followed or not, which, she did. I don't care what you believe, I'm not lying. Okay, then what have you been doing? Training. By yourself? That hard? Sakura seemed incredulous. Is that a crime now? No, it's just, why would you do that alone? Deep down, Sakura knew how much Naruto hated being alone. And, despite how annoyingly obnoxious he could be, he had enough friends that he didn't need to do something like training by himself. In fact, she knew for a certainty that Lee would have been more than willing. At least, he hadn't had any plans when he left her house this morning. And, with that thought, Naruto's face wasn't the only one sporting an unhealthy blush. I don't always have to be around people. Naruto defended, even though his voice was less than certain. I know. Before either one of them knew it, they climbed the stairs to Naruto's apartment, both noticing a large, white box leaning against his front door as they approached. Hey, Naruto, were you expecting a package? Scratching his head, Naruto stared down at the plain white box, only, on closer inspection, it wasn't so plain. In small, silver letters was the name of a prominent clothier. At least, Naruto had heard they did good work. He'd never been in the store before. What was the point when he couldn't even afford to buy a single sock, let alone the pair? As his finger traced over the lettering, Sakura screeched behind him. Sengals? Is that really a package from there? Naruto shrugged while gingerly picking up the box. Maybe, although I don't know why. Sakura didn't even ask for permission to come in as Naruto opened his apartment door and walked inside. After moving a few cups of empty ramen, he set the box down on his countertop, staring dumbly at the thing. Aren't you going to open it? Sakura asked impatiently, making Naruto jump at the shrillness in her voice. What if it's not for me? He asked. They probably got the wrong place and delivered it here by mistake, ouch. Hey, what was that for? Naruto asked while rubbing the growing lump on the back of his head. Idiot. It has your name right on it. Oh, well, Sakura did have a point. There in the very lower right-hand corner, in beautifully inked letters was the name, Uzumaki Naruto. Damn it, if you don't open it, I will. Okay, Kami-sama, just calm down. Careful not to rip the box, Naruto gently popped the top open, pulling away the light tissue paper to reveal the most beautiful shirt he'd ever seen. Lifting it from the box, he marveled at the soft feel. There was no mistaking the high-grade silk comprising the sapphire blue, long-sleeved shirt. Running up the center were hand-sewn ties, and along the bottom, brilliant orange koi twisted and swam in a wondrous symphony. Kami, Naruto, that's beautiful, Sakura said with awe. Reaching out, she ran a hand down the length of the shirt. Oh, it's so soft. And it matches your eyes perfectly. I can't even imagine how much that cost. Naruto stared at the object in his hands, for once in his life, completely speechless. Sakura had no such verbal problem as she began rummaging through the box, lifting out a gleaming white pair of cotton pants as she came back up for air. You are going to look amazing in this. Taking in the pants, Naruto's brain fumbled through his faded memory banks. Something about this seemed familiar. Not the clothes themselves, but the idea of receiving them. The pieces were just starting to come together when Sakura spoke up again. Look Naruto, there's a card. Reaching into the almost empty box, Sakura pulled out a small card, her eyebrows furrowing as she read the front, Dobi. Forgetting his weariness, Naruto's hand shot out lightning fast, ripping the envelope from Sakura's hand and tearing open the seal. Quickly his eyes roamed the script, his mouth turning into a deep frown. Dobi, since you were such a girl and concerned about what to wear tonight, I took the liberty of getting you an appropriate outfit. Do not be late, your fiancé. That fucking bastard. Naruto breathed while flinging the note to the floor, only to be picked up by Sakura, her furrowed brows rising as her eyes widened. Naruto, is this from Sass? The shirt was now back in the box and Naruto was pacing his apartment floor, his hands tugging relentlessly at his blonde locks. Asshole, how dare he keep treating me like a girl? Naruto, why is it signed, your fiancé? Sakura's voice was quiet, but firm, finally making Naruto turn to face the woman he'd forgotten was even there. Letting out a choked laugh, Naruto threw his hands in the air. Damned if I know. Stupid Teme is up to something. Sakura's eyes were intent as she wondered if what she'd suspected all these months to years was true. Tell me what happened. Flopping down on his sofa, Naruto hung his head between his legs before setting his chin in his hands. Somewhere, in the back of his mind, he registered Sakura's light weight shifting beside him as he started to relate yesterday's events. Long story short, Tsunade called me into her office yesterday and told me that Teme made an official request to marry me. Naruto heard a sharp intake of breath from Sakura and interpreted it to mean she was as surprised as he was. I know. I was like, what the fuck? So I went to his house and was going to beat the shit out of him. Here, Naruto's voice faded. For a second, he thought about telling Sakura how close he'd come to losing control and really hurting Sasuke. It wasn't like she didn't know about Kyuubi, but all the same, he decided to keep that bit of information to himself. Anyway, I told him it was a pretty shitty joke. But then he had the gall to tell me it wasn't a joke and that he wouldn't take it back. Running a jerking hand through his hair, Naruto added, then he told me if I go on a date tonight with him, to Shugita's, that he'd explain everything. The Tame's up to something. I just don't know what. Sakura stared, her mouth agape. It wasn't that she was upset, nor hurt by this sudden turn of events. Hell, she wasn't even really surprised Sasuke felt this way about Naruto. What did surprise her was the way he was going about it. And she only wished she was surprised by Naruto's response. After taking a minute to digest the information, Sakura laid a gentle hand on her friend's arm. Naruto, have you considered Sasuke's feelings might be real? Naruto jerked back as if he'd been burned, staring down at the spot on his arm where Sakura's hand had just been. Why would you say something like that? Sasuke barely acknowledges that I'm his friend, let alone, gulping loudly, he turned his face away, trying to hide the blush creeping back into his cheeks. Sighing, Sakura shook her head. Sasuke might be a genius when it came to jutsus and fighting, but he was an idiot when it came to feelings. Then again, Naruto was pretty thick. Maybe he thought this was the only way to get through to the blonde. Naruto, I want you to promise me something, Sakura ventured. Turning big, innocent blue eyes towards one of his best friends, Naruto automatically answered, anything. Sakura smiled, she just couldn't help herself. Don't jump to conclusions tonight. What are you talking about? For once in your life, keep your mouth shut and listen. Don't read anything else into what he's saying than the words themselves. Sometimes people actually mean what they say. Huh? Folding her hands in her lap, Sakura looked down and sighed again before standing to leave. Just have a good time tonight. Oh, I plan to. The bastard's paying and you know how much I can eat. Sakura couldn't help but smile again at the wide and happy grin stretching across Naruto's face. Laughing, she began walking towards the door. Get some rest. I have a feeling you're going to need it. Just as she was about ready to close the door, Sakura turned and gave a soft smile. Naruto, I'm happy for you. And then she left, leaving an even more confused blonde idiot heading for his bed, finally able to catch a few winks before his big night. Sasuke looked at his watch one final time before knocking on Naruto's door. He was 2 minutes early, but having no idea what to do with the 120 extra seconds, he simply decided to get the evening started sooner rather than later. Inwardly, he wondered if Naruto would be home or if he'd decided to bail on the idea of having a date with him. But in the end, he decided his blonde objective would definitely be behind the door. He'd been promised a date, and if there was one thing Naruto always did, it was keep his word. His knuckles had barely rasped the door a third time before a smirk flitted across Sasuke's mouth at Naruto's grumbled words filtering through the closed door. Stop pounding. It's not even 7 yet. As the door opened, Sasuke was greeted by the top of Naruto's sunny golden hair. Reaching down, Naruto was in middle of smoothing down his precious blue shirt, only looking up after the door was wide open. Watching with a mixture of satisfaction and awe, Sasuke's black eyes narrowed mischievously as he saw Naruto's mouth gape, his wide blue eyes obviously ogling the sight before him. For his part, Sasuke knew he looked good. Completely in black, his clothes mirrored the ones he'd gotten Naruto. Leaning casually against the doorframe, arms crossed the ebony silkiness enshrouding Sasuke's body, the red flames embroidered around the bottom licking up his chest in the most tantalizing of ways. Dobi, are you going to stand there and drool all night, or are you ready to go? Cold water splashed across his face couldn't have woken Naruto up any quicker, and the sheer force of his lower jaw making contact with his upper one nearly knocked him unconscious. Feeling the burn of a fresh blush, Naruto shifted his eyes, looking away as he exited his home. It's not my fault you're so unnaturally beautiful. Anyone would look. Sasuke stared at the back of Naruto's head for a few seconds, completely shocked by what he'd just admitted. Turning his head at the silence, Naruto saw the brief look of uncertainty in Sasuke's eyes. It was a rare glimpse of emotion and he only shrugged. What? It's not like you don't already know that. Sasuke shook his head. Just surprised to hear you say it. Yeah, well, don't get used to the compliments. I still think you're a bastard. By now they'd reached the bottom of the steps and Naruto turned to look up at his wannabe fiancé, giving Sasuke a wonderful view of just how good he looked in the new clothes. Truly, he couldn't have picked better if Naruto had been in the store with him. Just as he'd thought, the blue silk perfectly matched Naruto's eyes, although, it still paled in comparison. In the years he'd been away from the leaf, Sasuke had spent hours looking into people's eyes, always searching for that brilliant blue hue that saw straight to his soul. But in all the time he'd spent looking, he'd never even come close to finding its equal, and since coming back, he'd made sure to burn the color into his memory. Sasuke? Refocusing, Sasuke realized he'd let his mind wander, completely ignoring the beautiful blonde standing before him, waving his hands. Hey, earth to asshole. Get your hands out of my face, Sasuke practically growled. Fine, as if I wanted them there to begin with. For a minute there I thought your brain had left your body or something. Idiot. Hey, I'm not the one practically going into a coma while standing on their feet. Don't, me. That's not even a word, teme. Ga. Turning on his heel, Sasuke started walking towards the heart of Konoha, and more importantly, the higher-end areas. Come on Dobi. Our reservation's in half an hour. Hey, wait for me. Jogging a few steps, Naruto easily caught up to Sasuke, walking silently beside him while placing his hands behind his head. But soon the quiet was too much for Naruto to bear and he began talking. Oi, have you ever eaten at this place before? Of course. Oh, Naruto's arms fell to his sides, stuffing his hands in his pockets as his mind trailed back to the same thoughts he'd had the day before, wondering if he'd really be welcomed into such an establishment. If he were honest with himself, that thought had kept him up more last night than the unease of going on a date with his best friend. He'd gone round and round about it, thinking that maybe he should say something to Sasuke regarding the possibility. But this was an Uchiha he was talking about. Somehow Naruto doubted the restaurant would really kick them out if an Uchiha was involved. Suddenly, Naruto looked up to find himself walking alone. Stopping, he turned his head to find Sasuke standing, his dark eyes narrowed. "What?" Naruto asked. "Why are you being so quiet? It's abnormal." Naruto fumed. "I was thinking. Oh, so that was the source of smoke I saw coming from your ears." Teme. Soft giggling combined with high-pitched squeals stopped Naruto mid-insult. Turning his head to see where the noise was coming from only elicited a groan. "Kami, did you really have to wear that outfit tonight, bastard?" Sasuke snorted. "Now what are you babbling about?" Naruto waved his arms in the air. "Did you even bother to look in a mirror? We're going to be hounded by your fangirls all night long." Tilting his head up, Sasuke's irritation turned into a devious smirk. "Jealous? Could your head swell any bigger?" Instantly, Sasuke's thoughts ventured south, totally perverting Naruto's innocent statement. "As if I'd be jealous about a bunch of girls who've been chasing after you since we were kids. You hate them more than anyone. It's just that with you looking like that, they're gonna be bugging us all night long." For the first time in a very long time, Sasuke spared a glance at the group of girls standing across the street. Their faces flushed as they clung to each other whispering. But what Naruto failed to notice, or more likely was just too damn naive to see, was that they weren't just looking at ebony on white skin, but brilliant blonde against tanned. Shaking his head, Sasuke was once again floored at how utterly oblivious Naruto could be. For a shinobi, he wasn't very observant. "Idiot," Sasuke whispered while starting to walk towards the restaurant once again. Puffing out his cheeks, Naruto huffed, "It's not my fault you dressed to attract so much attention." Sasuke's body made a full stop, his eyes narrowed and cold as he turned to face Naruto. "You think I dressed this way to impress them?" he asked, his thumb pointing at the annoyingly growing horde of young women. Scratching his head, Naruto's blue eyes widened, unsure what he'd said wrong. "Well, no, not exactly. I mean, we both had to dress nice for this restaurant, didn't we? So, now you think I picked my clothes to impress a bunch of people I don't give two shits about in some fancy restaurant?" Inwardly, Naruto cringed at the coldness in Sasuke's voice. Outwardly, he got angry. "What crawled up your stoic ass and died? Are you really this stupid, or do you just play dumb?" Naruto balled his hands into fists of fury. "Is this how you're going to act tonight? Is this why I put on these stupid clothes? So, now the clothes I bought you are stupid." "Damn!" Sasuke's voice had gone from cold to frozen in a matter of seconds. "Damn it, that's not what I meant. That's what you said." "I know, it's just," Naruto sighed, although he generally liked arguing with Sasuke, for some reason, tonight, it just didn't feel right. "I don't think the clothes are stupid. They're actually really nice. It's gonna take me forever to pay you back for them." "Pay me back? Who said I wanted you to do that?" Naruto felt his cheeks getting hot again. "Teme, I don't need your charity and I sure as hell don't want your money." "Moron, I know that. The clothes were a gift." Naruto looked genuinely startled. "Why?" Unconsciously rubbing his hands down the ultra-soft fabric, Naruto's brow furrowed. "I don't know exactly how much this cost, but it had to be a lot. Why would you spend so much on something for me?" Sasuke stared, utterly speechless as he searched Naruto's eyes for some indication that he was just trying to goad him, but all he saw was sincere confusion, which, unfortunately, explained this entire conversation. Really and truly, Naruto had no idea what he meant to the Uchiha. For all his boasting, most likely Naruto had no true idea what he meant to anyone. Sighing, Sasuke felt his shoulders relax as his feet moved, crossing the small distance he'd placed between himself and Naruto. Unthinking, he started to reach out a hand, wanting nothing more than to touch beautifully tanned skin in an effort to convey how desperately he needed the dobi in his life. But as his hand neared scarred cheeks, Naruto flinched, pulling his body inward, the life briefly draining from his sapphire eyes. Dropping his hand before it made contact with his desired flesh, Sasuke placed his hands in his pockets while leaning over, his mouth close to Naruto's ear as he whispered, "Dobi, for the record, I dressed this way for only one person, you. And, if it makes you feel better, think of the clothes as a mutual gift. They're for you to keep, but even better, I like the way your ass looks in those white pants." Pulling away, Sasuke stared down with a satisfied smirk, watching red slowly creep down Naruto's face to color his tantalizing neck as well. "Now, if that's settled, let's go eat." Sasanaru 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 Sasanaru. Naruto eyed Sasuke, careful not to walk in front of him. Although he was sure Sasuke was up to something, he wasn't about to give the pervert any kind of opportunity to stare at his ass. For his part, Sasuke seemed content with their previous exchange, even though he doubted Naruto believed him, no matter how blatantly honest he'd been. Regardless, Naruto's recent walking position let him know that at least the Dobi was thinking about what he'd said. Soon enough, they found themselves standing in front of a small podium, the host of Shugitas staring down at something neither of them could see, his small eyes focused intently on whatever it said. Still standing behind Sasuke, Naruto let his eyes wander around the small waiting area they were in. If the rest of the restaurant was even half this nice, then it must be one gorgeous place. Below his sandaled feet, obsidian glass tiles decorated the floor, while twin dragons entwined themselves in a never-ending battle of wills. Above him, hung sheer red curtains, leaving an oddly beautiful crimson light to illuminate its guests. And, from somewhere close by, Naruto could hear and smell the gentle rush of water. He'd heard there were multiple ponds and waterfalls throughout the place, something his ears and nose confirmed. As Naruto's wide eyes took in the scenery around him, Sasuke spoke to the thin man behind the podium. "Reservations for Uchiha Sasuke." "Ah, Uchiha-san. A private room for two, is that correct?" Sasuke nodded. At the mention of a private room, Naruto's ears perked up and he finally turned, glancing around Sasuke's shoulders as he asked, "A private room?" Sasuke turned at the question, having totally missed how close Naruto had gotten to him while he'd been talking, finding himself staring into blue pools of barely contained emotion. "I thought we could use the privacy to talk." Naruto looked skeptical. After the comment about his ass earlier, he was beginning to think Sasuke had paid a little bit too much attention to Kakashi-sensei's teachings. "Sure Teme, whatever you say. Naruto, you did want to find out why I made that official request, didn't you?" "Naruto?" The host's voice interrupted anything Naruto might have said in return, and soon black and blue eyes turned to look questioningly at the man who'd interrupted them. "Uzumaki Naruto?" Without a second thought, Sasuke answered, "Yes." The man's tiny eyes darted from Sasuke to Naruto, finally taking a closer look at the Uchiha's guest, and now that he did take the time to look, it was obvious who the blonde was. Coughing into his hand, the host excused himself. "One moment please. I need to check on something." And then in a nervous dash, he was gone. Sasuke stood perplexed, an emotion he rarely suffered from. What was that about? "I think maybe I should leave." Sasuke could feel his eyes narrowing even before he turned, but when he saw the look on Naruto's face, his softened. Something was wrong, but he had no idea what. "Why would you leave? We just got here." "Yeah, but somehow I doubt I'm going to get any further than this room." Irritation was an emotion Sasuke found himself all too acquainted with while around the blonde, and it seemed tonight was going to be no different. "Damn it Naruto. What's wrong with you now?" Anger filled Naruto's body, the obvious tone of Sasuke's voice clearly indicating his annoyance with him. "Teme, nothing's wrong with me. Uchiha-san, may we have a word in private?" Once again, Naruto was cut off by someone else, only this time, the man doing the talking was better dressed, his small, round glasses sliding precariously down his nose as he took a quick appraisal of Sasuke and an even longer one of Naruto. Naruto felt his whole body stiffen, he knew what was coming. Granted, it didn't happen as often now as it had when he was younger, but he knew the look all the same. Sasuke saw Naruto's reaction and knew he'd gone on the defensive. Not that it looked like he was ready for a physical fight, more like a mental or emotional one. The dead eyes, closed-off posture, stiff muscles, Naruto was bracing himself for something. Sasuke only wished he knew what so he'd be a little more prepared. Turning so that his full attention was on the owner of the restaurant, Sasuke let his body go cold, giving the man his most bored facial mask. I have nothing to say to you, in private. The owner stiffened, but only nodded. As you wish. Then, taking a small step forward, he flatly stated, although we are always more than pleased to have an Uchiha dine with us, we were unaware of who your guest for this evening would be. Unfortunately, the level of our patronage does not allow for such a creature to dine with them. Sasuke's face showed no emotion while his brain screamed at the term creature. He hadn't even called Naruto by his name. Excuse me, what exactly are you saying? The deadly low tone was a warning. And Naruto knew it was the only one Sasuke's enemies ever got. Sasuke, Naruto said while grabbing a fistful of Sasuke's shirt. The vessel is not welcome in our restaurant. The vessel has a name. The owner visibly prickled, his shoulders squaring. No matter what the name, it is not welcome here. This establishment serves the upper crust of Konoha society, not its horrific creations. By now, Sasuke's eyes were bleeding red, his body deathly still. But behind him, a soft laughter was sliding across his skin. Naruto's laughter. Horrific creation? You've got to give him points for creativity, huh, bastard? Turning his spinning eyes towards his friend, he saw a wide grin splitting Naruto's face, but despite the laughter and smile, his eyes were cold and dead. Seriously, Sasuke, that's one of the best ones I've heard. Sasuke felt the weight of Naruto's fingers leave his shirt and looked down to see the slightly wrinkled fabric, already missing the closeness of the hand. Oi, as fun as this is, I think I'll be going. Somehow I doubt I'd like the food here anyway, Naruto said, his body already turning and heading for the door. Watching the door silently close behind a mop of blonde hair, Sasuke stood, astounded by Naruto's relatively calm reaction. There was a reason Naruto was known as the #1 loudmouth hyperactive ninja. The owner had no idea how lucky he'd been. Nor, as it turned out, just how far he should push said luck. Uchiha-san, it goes without saying that you are certainly welcome back anytime you wish to eat here. As a matter of fact, consider your next meal on the house. Might I further suggest that if there is some reason you feel you owe your associate some type of payment for a deed he has performed for you, then there are several lower-class establishments whose standards should be low enough. Walk away. Those two words dropped into the silent lobby like a stone. Pardon? Sasuke dropped his head, allowing his dark bangs to cover his spinning eyes. Walk away. Now, I don't understand. Clearly, that at least is true. Let me explain. When you go home tonight, take off your shoes and sink into the comfort of your home. As you lie next to whatever partner in life you've chosen who can stand your bigoted nature. Remember this. You owe this evening and every one after to the person you just threw out. The owner sucked in a shallow breath, the air hissing through his thinned lips. Are you saying I should be grateful that monster didn't kill me? Sasuke laughed, but it wasn't funny. Depends on which monster you're referring to. You never had anything to fear from Naruto. That person has more humanity in a single golden eyelash than you have in the whole of your miserable body. Then, taking a step closer, Sasuke gave the owner the full brunt of his bloody eyes. This monster, on the other hand, is a completely different matter. The caustic smell of urine hit Sasuke's nose and sparing a glance down, he smirked at the ever-darkening spot in the man's crotch. With barely a passing HN of satisfaction, Sasuke turned and headed for the door. As his hauntingly delicate fingers reached around the door handle, Sasuke turned, just enough to make sure his red, spinning eyes were visible. It's good to know that Uchihas are welcome in your restaurant. Once Naruto and I are married, I'll be sure to bring the newest Uchiha here. Of course, I will expect his meal to be complimentary, as well as my own. Thanks for reading. More to come. Sasuke thought Naruto would be standing outside, waiting for him. But instead, the blonde was halfway down the street by the time he finally finished up with the owner. For a moment, Sasuke considered running to catch up, but closing his eyes, he teleported instead, startling Naruto as he suddenly appeared before him. For fuck's sake, Sasuke, a little warning would be appreciated. Sasuke totally ignored the comment. You didn't wait for me. Why would I? Why wouldn't you? Because, I didn't expect you to leave. What? Well, you weren't the one getting kicked out. You wanted to eat there, so I thought. The words dried up in Naruto's mouth as he suddenly found Sasuke's furious eyes focused on him. If he hadn't seen that look before, he'd have flinched, but instead, he stood his ground, holding the Uchiha's gaze. Moron, why would I ever eat somewhere you aren't welcome? Reaching up, Naruto rubbed the back of his head. Well, I dunno. It's just, you didn't. Idiot, Sasuke mumbled, his eyes relaxing as he reached up a hand to push a wayward lock of golden hair out of Naruto's eyes. But once again, the action was met with a distinct flinch and his hand fell away before making contact. Sighing, he turned and started walking again. Let's find somewhere else to eat. Really? Naruto asked, scurrying to catch up to the Uchiha. I'm still hungry. Yeah, me too. They walked for a few moments in silence, but Sasuke was still curious about Naruto's subdued reaction and finally asked, why didn't you blow up at him? What do ya mean? Dobi, I've suffered through more than a few shattered eardrums when you're mad. Naruto shrugged. I guess I wasn't angry. Sasuke scoffed. He was pissed enough for the both of them. Why the hell not? Because, it's pointless. Sasuke was silent, staring down at his friend as they continued walking. He's ignorant and doesn't want to change that part of himself. I don't argue with people whose opinion means nothing to me. A thin smile graced Sasuke's lips. So, that must mean my opinion matters to you the most. Naruto growled, but only managed a meek bastard before running his hand roughly through his hair as Sasuke quietly chuckled. So, you really aren't bothered by it? Sasuke just couldn't believe that. He'd seen the look in Naruto's eyes, the tense set to his body. I wouldn't say that, but what mostly upset me is that I should have said something earlier. Huh? Yeah, I thought something like that might happen. What? Then why did you agree to go? Naruto blushed from embarrassment. Well, I'd kind of convinced myself that since I was with an Uchiha, they wouldn't dare not let me in. Sasuke started to call Naruto an idiot again, but in reality, he'd kind of been thinking the same thing. Not that he'd known ahead of time, but the longer he thought on it now, he was a little taken aback. Being the last Uchiha did come with some perks, most of which he hated, but even after his past discrepancies, there was little he was denied. So instead of calling his friend Adobe, he simply said, HN. Anyway, I guess I should apologize or something. Apologize? For what? Naruto laughed, and Sasuke was glad to hear the honesty in it. Well, Teme, I'm sort of used to getting kicked out of places, but I'll bet it was kind of a new experience for you. Sorry for the embarrassment. Then the laughter died and Sasuke was acutely aware of the anxiety filtering back into the blonde. Naruto, I was just thinking. Again? Don't tax yourself too much tonight. I think a lot more now than I used to. HN. And how's that working out for you? Naruto stopped, his face red with fury. Asshole. I can't believe I was feeling guilty about anything, when really, you should be grateful for what just happened. Sasuke crossed his arms over his chest, his posture taking on the look of someone incredibly bored. See, this is why you shouldn't think, because that made absolutely no sense. Assuming, just for a minute, that Sakura is right and you've got no ulterior motive for the whole fiancé thing. Sakura? What does she have to do with this? Naruto waved his arms in the air in utter frustration. I spoke to her earlier today, but that's not what's important right now. No? Then what is? This. What just happened? It's good that you got to see it before this goes any further. Sasuke's bored facade became acutely more interested, having a distinct feeling he wasn't going to like what Naruto's mind had come up with. Explain. Ga, why do you have to make everything so difficult? Moving his hand rapidly, pointing from himself to Sasuke in quick succession, Naruto's voice was exasperated. You, me, you and me. This is what it's like being with me. The looks, the stares, the animosity. You're an Uchiha, the last Uchiha. Most of the village accepts us hanging out because they think you have no other choice. We're teammates and they excuse you for it. I mean, it wasn't your fault we were put on a team together. But anything else, and what? Naruto was pulling at his hair, vaguely wondering if he'd have any left by the time he figured out what was going on between them. Kami, I don't even know why I'm talking about this. We're friends. Best friends, Sasuke corrected. Yeah, best friends, Naruto agreed, uncomfortable with the warmth spreading through his chest. Inching closer, Sasuke lifted an eyebrow. Best friends with benefits. Best friends with what? Naruto's eyes widened, wondering how and when Sasuke had gotten so close. Close enough to feel his breath ghosting across one of his scared cheeks as Sasuke answered. There's only one person whose opinion I care about. The rest of this damn village can burn to the ground for all I care. Sasuke, don't say that. Why? It's true. There's only one reason why I came back. Why I stay? Sasuke, Naruto felt his breath catch in his throat. He wanted to say more. Wanted to tell Sasuke how much he wanted that to be true. He might be confused as hell about what he was feeling right now, but one thing was for certain, being the Uchiha's most important person was pure bliss to Naruto's wounded soul. Silence hung in the air while Sasuke remained, his lips a mere hair's breadth away from Naruto's cheek, constantly assaulting the tanned skin with its mind-numbing sensations. Uncontrolled shivers began racking Naruto's body as he stood, unsure what to do. He'd never allowed himself to view Sasuke as anything more than a friend, and in his mind, even that term was pushing what their relationship was. Sure, he'd always known Sasuke was drop-dead gorgeous. A person would have to be blind not to notice that, but he'd never considered the moonlight skin and silky raven hair as anything more than what it was. But now, Naruto, Sasuke, what are the two of you doing in the middle of the street? Stepping back, Sasuke scowled at the woman below a hazy pink rainbow of hair. Just when he'd been making progress. Sakura-chan. Lee, Naruto breathed, the sound heavy with relief. Naruto, my young and jovial friend. How good it is to see you looking so resplendent in the finery of silken fabric. Both Sakura and Naruto stared at the beaming creature that was Rock Lee, while Sasuke crossed his arms over his chest, his face apathetic once again. Scratching the back of his head, Naruto looked towards Sakura, who only shrugged her shoulders at her boyfriend's odd choice of wording. By now, she was used to it. Thanks Lee. I think. You are most welcome. Then, turning to Sasuke, Lee beamed once again. And you, Sasuke, you are looking most dapper as well in your choice of clothing for this evening. Lee's happy exterior faltered only a fraction of a second before a blinding smile once again lit up his face. Sakura and I were on our way to meet Hinata and Kiba for dinner at Choji's parents' restaurant. Also, I believe my rival Neji will be there chaperoning his cousin. Would the two of you like to join us? Lee, I think they've already got plans. Naruto looked from Sakura to Sasuke and made a decision, and just as Sasuke was agreeing with Sakura, Naruto walked over, throwing an arm around Sasuke's shoulders as he happily said, "Actually, we'd love to join you for dinner." Sasuke's eyes narrowed, Dobi. But whatever he was going to say next suddenly evaporated when he looked into Naruto's pleading blue eyes. Teme, I've eaten there before. Understanding washed through Sasuke and his features softened, the meaning behind Naruto's words were clear. If he'd eaten there in the past, it meant he was welcome. And if it was Choji's family they were talking about, then that meant he'd be more comfortable there as well. Casually shrugging his shoulders, Sasuke muttered, "Whatever," and instantly missed the warmth of Naruto's body as he moved away. Looking confused, Sakura cocked her head to the side. "But I thought you were going to." Sakura. Sasuke's cold voice silenced her as he shot a heated look towards Naruto, wondering just how much he'd discussed with their pink-haired friend. It wasn't that he was upset someone else knew about his proposal and thus ensuing plans, it was more like he felt jealous of Naruto and Sakura's friendship. So much had happened during the years of his absence. So much they'd shared without him. Shifting on his feet, Naruto looked out, towards the relatively empty street while rubbing the back of his hand across his nose, trying to answer Sakura's question without answering it at all. "Yeah, well, that didn't exactly work out." "Naruto?" Sakura's voice was soft as she raised a hand, reaching out towards her friend and teammate, instinctively knowing something was wrong. But just as her hand was about to make contact, Naruto conveniently dodged to the side, his lips curving into a wide grin. "Hey, I don't know about everyone else, but I'm starving and this bastard still owes me dinner." And with that, Naruto began walking down the street, a hyperactive Lee coming up to his side. Soon, both of them were totally engrossed in some kind of conversation, leaving their respective dates still standing in the middle of the road. "Sasuke, what happened?" But Sasuke barely heard the question. Instead, his mind was replaying what he'd just seen and he mumbled, "So, it's not just me." "What?" Sasuke stared down at the top of Sakura's ridiculously pink hair. Or, at least that's what he'd once thought. He supposed it was something he'd gotten used to over the years, just like the Dobi's stupidity. He now found them both oddly endearing. And, although he hated how close Sakura and Naruto were, logic dictated she might be a good resource. Plus, Sakura was a girl, and sometimes girls just had a knack for figuring out certain things. He always flinches or pulls away. Sakura's eyebrows bunched together, still lost as to what the exact topic of their conversation was. Who? Naruto? Sasuke nodded before responding. He touches other people, hugs them, or like just now, he put his arm around me. And, I've touched him multiple times during a spar or all-out fight. Hell, at the Valley of End, I put my fist through his chest. Sasuke. Sakura's sharp tone brought him out of his thoughts. I know what you did to him, but I don't want to hear about it, understand? For a moment, Sasuke wondered if Sakura was going to haul off and hit him. In a way, he thought she really wanted to, but was holding back, which was most likely a good thing. Not that she'd probably manage to land the punch, but if she did, he knew it would hurt. After all, Sakura was unreasonably strong. Nodding his head again, Sasuke clarified what he was trying to get at. Just now, when you tried to touch him, he moved, avoiding it. I thought it was just me. Sakura felt understanding dawn along with a significant slump in her shoulders. I know. Any theories? Sakura laughed. Me? I thought you were supposed to be the genius. But the comment only earned her a glare. You're not dumb. Thanks. But next time you try and give a compliment, try not sounding so sarcastic. Sakura's own sarcasm lending a biting sting to her words, which Sasuke ignored. Well? Sakura sighed, shaking her bubble-gum hair as she answered. Maybe. Sasuke's silence was his indication for her to continue. I know your history, Sasuke. I know you've been alone a long time, but at some point, when you were younger, you were loved. Careful to keep his suddenly raging emotions in check. All Sakura saw on Sasuke's face was a look of boredom. Your parents, especially your mother, they touched you, comforted you when you were hurt, kissed the injury away, held you in both happy and sad times. But Naruto, Sakura's eyes went sad, as if she were personally feeling the hurt of her friend. He never had that, not even as a baby. As children, the only time any of us ever touched him was during a fight or to reprimand one of his stupid comments. Blushing slightly, she added, me worst of all. I don't think he knows what to do. He acts so happy and his heart is full to nearly bursting with love for all of his precious people, but he doesn't know how to accept it in return. He gives and gives until there is almost nothing left of him, but Naruto doesn't know how to receive. Sometimes, I wonder if he even thinks he deserves it. During her explanation, Sakura had been steadfastly staring at her feet, only venturing to look up into Sasuke's blank eyes once she'd finished, completely at a loss as to what he was thinking until he whispered, idiot. What? Of course he deserves it. The heat Sakura had felt rising to her cheeks cooled in an instant and she found her head nodding in agreement. No one deserves it more. Sasuke. What? Naruto told me about your request. About you wanting to marry him. So, are you sincere? Sasuke didn't even think twice before answering, yes. Sakura blew out a breath, relief flooding her body. You know he thinks there's some kind of tortuous reason behind it. I know. Sakura didn't miss the annoyance in her friend's voice. I think I've known for a while how you feel, but Naruto hasn't. Reaching over, Sakura grabbed a hold of Sasuke's arm, her turquoise eyes looking up at him in friendship, something Sasuke was grateful for. He'd always hated that puppy dog look she used to give him, but this newer one was something he could respect. He loves you more than anyone. Those years you were gone. Sakura's voice trailed off, her eyes misting over as she left the words unspoken. You just need to prove to him that you mean it. The love is there. Find a way to make him see it. Oi, Sakura-chan, Sasuke-teme, are you two coming anytime soon? Sakura squeezed Sasuke's arm, but refused to let it go and was surprised when he didn't force her hand away. Grunting, Sasuke stated, come on, our idiot cohorts are getting too far ahead of us. Sasuke missed the hand coming up to punch him in the chest, a harsh whoosh of breath making a hasty exit from his body as Sakura shouted, don't call Lee an idiot. Sasanaru 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 Sasanaru. By the time they arrived at the Akamishi's restaurant, both Hyugas along with one Inuzuka were already seated, drinks on the table. Greetings friends. We apologize for our late arrival. Bowing deeply at the waist, Lee looked sincerely sorry as he faced their three friends. About time, Kiba accused, but both his voice and brown eyes lit with mischief once he saw their extra companions. Standing up, he sauntered over to Naruto, his eyes roving over the blonde in an appreciative way. Damn Naruto, who knew you'd clean up so nice? Sasuke felt his skin prickle, his face contorting into a deep scowl. Shut it, mutt. Don't make fun of the way I look. Kiba's light eyes darkened slightly with confusion as he stared from Naruto to Sakura and then to Sasuke's soulless eyes, searching for a reason why Naruto thought he was making fun of him. But none of them seemed the least bit helpful. Dude, I was just… Naruto pushed Kiba aside, sitting across from a blushing Hinata, completely ignoring his friend. Hey, Hinata, what do you see in Dogface over there anyway? Hinata only blushed deeper. Naruto-kun, I don't think Kiba-kun was making fun of you. Waving a dismissive hand in the air, Naruto leaned over the table. No worries. I think he's just jealous that he doesn't look as cool as me. As if to give the point more emphasis, Naruto wiggled his eyebrows in a playful, yet suggestive manner, earning a throaty growl from Kiba. Ignoring Kiba's warning, Naruto reached a hand out, aiming for one of the strawberries he'd eyed laying on a plate in front of Hinata. But before his fingers could touch one piece of delicate fruit, he found his wrist captured by Kiba's hand. Kiba, what the hell? Keep your annoying body on your side of the table and away from my girlfriend. Naruto's blue eyes stared up in shock, but they only widened further when a pale hand descended on Kiba's arm. Sasuke, Inuzuka, why are you touching my dobi? The room went deathly silent, all eyes riveted on the strange sight of Naruto half leaning over the table, his fingers hovering above the plate of strawberries, Kiba's hand painfully gripping his wrist while Sasuke stood inches away from Kiba, his own hand grasping the man's arm. Although Kiba was no coward, he also had a healthy fear of one Uchiha Sasuke. Really, he wondered how on earth Naruto could stand being around someone so obviously cold and yet volatilely violent. He saw little redeeming qualities in the last Uchiha. Neji curiously watched the events unfolding in front of him while his cousin was near to passing out with worry. He could feel Lee's tension rising and knew something needed to be done quickly before more people were pulled into this odd tangle of emotions. Eyes blank, he calmly picked up his glass, taking a sip before speaking. Kiba, if you look at Naruto's hand, it is quite obvious to see he was reaching for the fruit, not my cousin. And, Uchiha, as much as I hate it, Hinata is quite fond of Kiba. If you injure him, the Hyugas would not be happy. As if I'm afraid of the Hyugas. Neji set his glass down, finally looking up into Sasuke's cold eyes. I will not debate the stupidity of that statement, but merely ask that you take others' feelings into consideration. At the word, others, Neji minutely shifted his head in Naruto's direction, essentially dragging Sasuke's eyes with it. Far from stupid, Neji was well aware that the only thing Uchiha Sasuke held with any regard was the obscenely annoying yet perceptive blonde sitting at their table. Neji, I don't need you to fight my battles for me. Sasuke barely heard Kiba's protests, as his eyes settled on the top of Naruto's blonde, trembling head. And no, Sasuke did not think the trembling was from fear or anxiety, but most likely uncontrollable rage at what he was doing. Taking a deep breath, he began counting down from 5. He gauged that was about all the time he had before. Teme, what the fuck do you think you're doing? And, there it was. At the outburst, both Kiba and Sasuke dropped their holds, each staring into Naruto's fuming face as he stood, blue eyes glaring. Inwardly, Neji laughed, knowing Naruto was the only person alive who'd ever be so blatantly antagonistic towards Sasuke. Well, except maybe for Sai, but he thought the only reason for that was due to Sai's complete and utter ignorance. But unlike Sai, Naruto would live to tell the tale. Dobi, you need to calm. Don't tell me what to do, asshole. Then, looking at Kiba, Naruto threw out an accusatory finger. Just for the record, all I wanted was a strawberry. I'd never hurt Hinata, or you for that matter. Kiba had the grace to blush. Naruto, I didn't think you were going to hurt her, Just what? Suddenly, Kiba seemed to be taking after his girlfriend as his face reddened even more. Scratching the back of his head while staring at his feet, Kiba couldn't even begin to look at Hinata nor Naruto as he answered, I just don't want anyone else touching her. She's my. Doing a complete emotional 180, Naruto let loose a gentle chuckle as he slapped Kiba on the back. Stop talking before Hinata dies of embarrassment. With his face splitting into a wide grin, He watched Kiba's head come up and give a slight nod as he said, "Sorry Naruto." Naruto shrugged, glad their misunderstanding was solved. Unfortunately, he still had to deal with the stoic bastard. With all laughter fading from his face, Naruto turned towards Sasuke, only to find the Uchiha looking bored, his hands stuffed into his pockets. "Teme, what's your excuse?" Sasuke huffed. "Same as Inuzuka's." "Huh? Why didn't you want me touching Hinata?" Really, by now, Sasuke shouldn't be surprised at how completely idiotic the love of his life could be. "Moron, I was talking about Kiba touching you." Across the table, Hinata began choking violently on the drink she'd just taken. Neji rubbing gently on her back, trying to calm his sputtering cousin. Naruto's face blanched before beginning to redden again as Sasuke stepped closer, practically whispering in his ear, "Although, I'm not particularly thrilled with the idea of you touching anyone but me." Placing his hands squarely in Sasuke's chest, Naruto pushed, knocking the Uchiha squarely on his ass. "Teme, you need to stop teasing me." "Who's teasing?" Although no one else had heard the words which earned Sasuke such a violent shove, Sakura could only imagine and rolled her eyes while walking over to give Sasuke a hand up. While leaning over, she whispered, "Sasuke, you and I need to have a serious discussion later." Sasuke stared at Sakura. "Why? Just come and talk to me before you ruin everything." "I'm not ruining anything." "Right, because the man you love is jumping at the chance to marry you." Sasuke felt his jaw tighten. If he was honest, things weren't going exactly smooth. Although it was true Naruto couldn't refuse his request, he also didn't want to force the blonde into doing anything either. Well, that wasn't completely true. He had no problems forcing him if that was the only way to secure Naruto as his. But, although he enjoyed fighting with his dobi, an entire lifetime of nothing but that wasn't all that appealing. Not nearly as appealing as having all that blonde hair and tanned skin spread out underneath him, writhing in expectant need, groaning and begging for more. Damn, but his pants were beginning to feel uncomfortable. A simple nod of his head was the only admittance he'd give Sakura that he needed her help. Thankfully, she didn't ask for more as she tugged on Sasuke's wrist, leading him to the table, sitting him down next to a still fuming Naruto as she took the seat on Sasuke's opposite side. Silently, Lee took the cue and came to sit on Sakura's free side. Finally recovering from the shock of what was just said, Kiba leaned across the table, his hand cupping his lips as he asked, "Hey, what's going on between you and the Ice Princess?" Naruto shook his head, not even beginning to know where to start. "Just do me a favor and drop it." Kiba shook his head. "No way, this is the most interesting thing that's happened in this village since the jackass came back." "Kiba," Naruto growled. Hinata's delicate hand came to rest on Kiba's arm, instantly grabbing his attention. "Kiba-kun, could you please leave Naruto-kun alone?" Sitting back down in his seat, Kiba couldn't help but feel a little ashamed. Hinata was so careful about everyone else's feelings, something his big mouth had never been good at. "Sure, whatever you want, Hina." Giving a soft smile, Hinata moved her hand down Kiba's arm, entwining their fingers together. "Thank you." Sasanaru 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 Sasanaru. Naruto stared at the utter bliss and contentment washing over Kiba's face and felt a deep pang of something close to loss. He was pretty sure he'd never felt that way about anyone, and he was equally as certain nobody had ever loved him that much. Certainly no one had cared about him enough to touch him in such an intimate manner. Not moving his head, Naruto's eyes darted to the raven-haired man sitting beside him. Sasuke Uchiha, his best friend, the person who meant everything and more, the Teme he'd spent years of his life trying to track down and bring back home. The man who'd hurt him more than he'd ever thought possible. And now, this person said they wanted to marry him. Why, he had no idea and somehow doubted he ever would. But at the end of the day, Sasuke's reasons didn't really matter. There never would be a wedding. Even if the two of them didn't kill each other first, the council would never allow the union. Maybe if Sasuke wasn't the last Uchiha, they would have. But not now. Even if they could get over the idea of having no more Uchiha progeny, they'd never accept a demon-carrying vessel as the accepted mate of one of their most precious clan's last warriors. The whole thing was just emotionally draining and pointless. "Dobi, you're thinking too much again." "Shut up, bastard. This is all your fault." "My fault?" Completely misreading what was bothering Naruto, Sasuke said, "I heard what Kiba asked you." I don't mind if you tell everyone we're officially engaged. Naruto's mouth dropped open before closing, sucking in a hissing breath. Why would I tell him that? It's never going to happen. Sasuke felt his eyebrows go up. Hadn't Tsunade told him he didn't have a choice? I'm from the Uchiha clan, Naruto. The request is official, you don't have the option of turning it down. Naruto rounded on him, his blue eyes furious. Asshole, I know that. Then why do you think we won't be married? Opening his mouth, Naruto had a list of reasons he was ready to throw at the Uchiha, but all of them died on his lips. This wasn't the time and it most certainly wasn't the place. Slumping his shoulders, Naruto turned, looking down at the empty table. We'll talk about it later. Right now I just want to get tonight over with and go home. Naruto. But servers had started coming in, their trays brimming with food, ending any discussion Sasuke wanted to have. It didn't take long for Naruto's mood to change, at least it appeared that way to everyone at the table. Both quick to anger, Naruto and Kiba were used to starting and ending fights in rapid succession and settled into an easy banter, each teasing the other with good-natured jibes and jokes, an atmosphere Hinata seemed to thrive in. Although their conversation was a bit more one-sided, both Neji and Lee appeared to be engrossed in some type of perceived competition, with Lee claiming he could twirl his chopsticks over 1,000 times without dropping them. Never once claiming Lee couldn't, Neji nevertheless found himself defending his position that he could do the same. With everyone's attention elsewhere, Sakura attempted to steer Sasuke in a direction leading somewhere besides disaster. So, what's your great plan? You know what my plan is. Sakura rolled her eyes. Yes, I know you've forced Naruto into an engagement, but how do you plan on getting him to accept you as more than a rival and friend? I'm working on it. Oh yes, as I said earlier, I can see how well that's going. Sasuke continued staring at his food, his narrowed eyes drifting towards his pink-haired friend. Are you saying I'm failing? Miserably. Sasuke could feel his shoulders go rigid. Uchihas didn't fail, they excelled. He only found out about my intentions yesterday and already we're on a date. I'd hardly call that failure. Sakura sighed. Naruto wasn't the only moron in the room. Speaking of that, could you have picked a worse way of going about this? You know how he is. Naruto doesn't take well to being told what to do. Add on the fact that he doesn't completely trust your motivations. If the positions were reversed and Hokage-sama ordered you to marry someone, that could never happen. Why? Because I'm an Uchiha. Oh, and because Naruto isn't from an honored clan gives him less rights? So the law says. And so you simply reinforced it. You're doing what you always do. You're making him feel like he's less than you. That he's not worthy, not good enough for his feelings and wishes to be taken into consideration. Sasuke swallowed the barely chewed food in his mouth, feeling every inch of its aching descent. Deep down, he knew Sakura had a point, a very good point. The law allowing him to force marriage upon whoever he wanted was antiquated and wrong. But since it served his purposes, he hadn't thought twice about invoking his rights, and thus eliminating Naruto's. But looking over at Naruto's bright blue eyes and expressive body as he teased Kiba, Sasuke knew he wouldn't change what he'd done, not if it got him what he wanted. Naruto was right. Uchiha Sasuke was a bastard. Looking back down at his plate, Sasuke wasn't about to admit Sakura was right. Instead, he simply gave the reasons for his actions. He's mine. He's what I want. Sakura sat back in her chair, amazed by both the coldness and frankness with which Sasuke had just spoken. But what about what he wants? Earlier you said Naruto loves me, so what makes you think I'm not what he wants? Oh Sasuke, I do think Naruto loves you. And, I think if we can get this whole mess you've created straightened out, that you'll be just about the best thing ever for each other. But what I want you to understand, is that you've dug yourself a huge, unnecessary hole. Why couldn't you have taken it slower? Asked him out on a date before filing a request for marriage. Sasuke could feel his face tighten as a single word slipped out, sigh. Sigh? What does he have anything to do with this? He is a symptom of a larger problem. Huh? Sai is interested in Naruto, as are many others. Naruto's just too much of a moron to realize. I think I'd call him more naive regarding people's affections. Sasuke shrugged, whatever. So, what did Sai do? Closing his eyes to hide the Sharingan flaring to life, Sasuke answered, he grabbed his ass, right in front of me. Oh, well, that's just, I don't know what to say. 2 days later, I filed my request. Sasuke, I don't think Naruto is interested in Sai. I mean, they're friends, sort of, but anything more. I don't care. As stated earlier, the Dobi is mine. No one else gets to touch him. Our marriage will make certain everyone in the village knows who Naruto belongs to. Belongs to? Kami, you are possessive. Sakura thought in silence, weighing what she'd just been told. Certainly, a part of her was disturbed by Sasuke's thinking, but then again, he was an Uchiha and in the end, she figured that kind of thinking was kind of ingrained in him. Besides, if there was anyone on the planet who could stand up to Sasuke Uchiha, it was one Naruto Uzumaki. Okay, let's forget how this all started. What's done is done, but you need to change tactics if you want more than Naruto's wrath. You do want more than that, don't you? Of course. Good, because if there's anybody who deserves more, it's him. Agreed. So, what are you doing after dinner? Sasuke shook his head, thinking back to what Naruto had said earlier about just wanting to get this evening over with and go home. I don't know. Right now, I don't think I can get the Dobi to do anything else tonight. Now who's admitting defeat? Careful Sakura. Waving a dismissive hand in the air, Sakura ignored the threat. You need to get him back to your place. And just how do you suggest I do that? Giving an evil smirk, Sakura winked. You let me take care of that. Sasuke raised a single eyebrow, re-evaluating the deviousness of his former teammate as he whispered, interesting. Don't look so surprised, Sasuke-kun. I can be underhanded when the occasion calls for it. Evidently, Sakura only smirked, not as good as an Uchiha smirk, but it definitely had merit, making Sasuke think Lee might be in a little over his head. So, I'll take care of getting him there, but once I leave it's all up to you. And what do you suggest I do tonight? Force him into submission? Not exactly. Sasuke was shocked. He thought Sakura would try and thump the back of his head for even suggesting what he just had, but instead, she seemed to think it a reasonable suggestion. I'm listening. The way I see it, you need to accomplish 2 things tonight. 1. Get Naruto to believe you're sincere in your feelings. And 2. Get him comfortable with your advances. Meaning? He needs to be able to tolerate you touching him, otherwise, this relationship isn't going to go anywhere. HN indeed. And how do you suggest I accomplish these things? Simple, what can Naruto never say no to? Besides ramen or a chance to kick my ass? Yes, a challenge. Sakura smiled evilly, exactly. Thanks for reading. More to come later. Just not sure when, but at the latest, this weekend. That's all for now. If you enjoyed then please like, share and do comments.